O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who knows himself as one with thee, know one with every other. Thank you. And yes, Vibhaji, please start. Embracing all in oneness.
Yes, namaste to everybody. Just give me 1 minute. I'm putting this live on YouTube.
Thank you. And Vibhaji, can you make me the co-host, please?
Done.
Thank you.
Right. So, namaste and good evening to everybody. As you know, we have been studying this letter number 93A and 93B, which Mahatma KH has written to Senate. Now, this is a rather long letter, and it contains a lot of information on occult science and also physical science. So last time I had prepared the slides, but I find it much easier to explain this letter without the slides because there's a lot of explanation. So if we have any questions, we'll take them up at the end. I'm just going to explain what Mahatma Ji has written in this letter. So last time what we have seen already is, I'll just repeat a little bit what we covered in our last session. So Mahatma Ji was talking about the rounds and the races and all the previous races and great civilizations that have risen and they have decayed. A series of civilizations, they existed even before the glacial period and even after the glacial period upon different places on this globe. And they reached the apex of their glory and they died. But modern writers, they don't accept this because there is no proof for it. And this rise of civilizations, along with that happens the submergence and emergence of continents and the sea. Okay, so now we'll go further. Further, Mahatma Ji mentioned that the Assyrian and the Phoenician civilizations, they have been completely forgotten until they were recently discovered. But he asks that how far do they go back in history? The oldest civilizations which are not yet known to us, they go back in history much, much more than these Assyrian and the Phoenician civilizations. And he says that even then, the sacred records of those old civilizations which were once mighty nations, their sacred records, they do exist and they have been preserved by their heirs. Okay. Now, who are these heirs? The heirs are the great hierarchy of adepts. And in their record books, all these sacred records of those once mighty nations, they are preserved. And Mahatma Ji is saying that these records are still more worthy of trust than what we get from this archaeological and the geological proofs. Okay. Then he is adding that the true unmixed Chinese people, they were the highest and the last branch of the fourth root race. We know the fourth root race was the Atlantean root race. And the last branch, that is the seventh branch. So the highest of that branch were these true unmixed Chinese people. And they reached their highest civilization when the fifth root race had not even appeared in Asia. And the first branch of this fifth root race, that is the Aryans, that had not even begun. It had not arisen at all. So it was a thing of the future. At that time, these Chinese people, they had reached the peak of their civilization. What we see presently, the present Chinese, they are a hybrid mixture between the fourth and the fifth races. That is the Atlantean and the Aryan races. So what Mahatma Ji just spoke about the highest Chinese people, they were the unmixed ones who were not mixed with the fifth race because the sixth had not yet started. Okay, then all this doctrine of rounds and races which Mahatma Ji is giving to Senate, he says that they are undeniable facts. But the odds of their acceptance by any person, it is tremendous. No, nobody easily believes that, oh, was this true? And at one point, even Hume had accused the Mahatmas of inventing new races and subraces to suit their doctrine. Then Mahatma Ji invites Senate's attention to even more discrepancies. He says that in the 19th century, there was this Arctic explorer, Nordenskjöld, and he explored this Arctic Ocean in his ship Vega. So he reached this group of islands, which is just off the Siberian coast, and he found that on that island there were fossils of horse and sheep and oxen. Now, science considers such animals to be of relatively recent evolution. They evolved together with the present day man, fossils of horses, sheep, and oxen. But surprisingly, on the same islands, he also found the fossils of gigantic antediluvian animals. Antediluvian meaning before the big flood, the huge deluge, which is mentioned in the Bible. So before that flood, all these gigantic animals which existed at that time, like the woolly mammoth, the elephant, and the rhinoceros, their fossils were also found on the same island. So, how come these fossils of two groups of animals were found together? And then explaining this discrepancy, Mahatma Ji says that these islands, which now the islands are where? They are off the coast of Siberia. So, they are far on the northern latitudes. And it is very, very cold. They are eternally wrapped in this never-ending winter. And they are not inhabited by any man now. But once upon a time, they had a nice, warm, tropical climate. And at that time, they were inhabited by the most ancient civilization of the fourth root race. So he's continuing telling us about that fourth root race. First, he tells about the pure unmixed Chinaman, and then the highest and the most ancient civilization of the fourth root race. It inhabited that island, which is now permanently wrapped in winter. And these remnants of the highest evolved men of the fourth root race, they are now found in the degenerated Chinaman. The degenerated Chinaman, the one who are pure and unmixed. So they are basically the remnants of the highest evolved men of the fourth root race, the Atlanteans. And he is calling them degenerate because now they have lost the physical, mental, and moral qualities of that race. So they were the highest evolved of the fourth root race. But the lesser evolved of the fourth root race, they got hopelessly intermixed with the even more older third root race. So, and he calls they are hopelessly intermixed because now you cannot even identify them separately. So he's telling, Mahatma Ji already told Senate earlier that the highest people now on earth, highest spiritually, the highest people spiritually now on earth, they belong to the first subrace of the fifth root race. And they are the Aryan Asiatics. Okay, so they are the spiritually highest people now on earth. This the race which is highest in terms of physical intellectuality. It is the latest subrace. That means the fifth subrace of the fifth root race. And they are these white conquerors or the European subrace to which Senate also belongs and which had colonized India and they had conquered many other regions of the world. Okay, so you see the intellectually highest, that is physical intellectuality. In that, these European subrace, they are the highest. But spiritually highest are the Aryan Asiatics, which was the first subrace of the Aryans. And majority of the mankind present on earth today, they belong to the last subrace of the fourth root race. Last subrace is seventh subrace, right? And that too belonging to the Atlantean or the fourth root race. So that is what the majority of present mankind belongs to. And we have seen already that it includes that pure Chinaman and also its offshoots and branchlets, like the people, the Malayan people, the Mongolians, the Tibetans, Javanese, all these people, they belong to seventh subrace of the fourth root race. Then there are also remnants of previous subraces of the fourth. Before the seventh subrace, all the sixth, fifth, fourth, their remnants are also there. And even the remnants of the seventh subrace of the third root race. So you see how far back in history all these things are going. The remnants of the seventh subrace of the third root race, even they are present on Earth today. We saw in our last session that they are the flat-headed aborigines of Australia. Okay, so there is a lot of overlap between the closing of one root race and the beginnings of the other root races. Now, this population, which in truth, the present population on Earth, in truth, it is the declining previous races. And they are the direct lineal descendants of once highly civilized nations, which are now forgotten, except there is this book called Popol Vuh, the Book of the People. It is a collection of myths and historical narratives from Guatemala. Right? So with that, Mahatma Ji completes the third answer to Sinet's question, and then we come to the fourth question which Sinet asked. He asked that.
Oh, it's like here more than 5 minutes now. But let's see for the kids for the.
Okay. So the next question which Sinet asked, he said, to what epoch did the existence of the continent of Atlantis belong, and did the cataclysmical change which produced its extinction come into any appointed place in the evolution of the round? Okay. So what this means is that in the evolution of rounds and races, are there fixed times when a particular continent, example Atlantis, it will become extinct? And to which period or epoch Atlantis belonged? To this, Mahatma Ji answered that Atlantis belonged to the Miocene times. It is a geological period. We saw the table last time. So everything comes in its appointed time and place in the evolution of rounds. Otherwise, it would be impossible even for the adepts or the best seers to calculate the exact time when such cataclysm will occur. Okay. See, we have heard so many times that mathematics is the language of the universe. All the movements and motions of heavenly bodies, all cosmological events, they all happen as per universal laws with mathematical precision. And if one can master this knowledge, it includes the study of astrology, astronomy. If one can master this knowledge, then he can precisely calculate the positions or the times of such events. Okay, a person with such a knowledge, then he will be able to predict with mathematical accuracy events which will cause great geological changes, the occurrence of lunar and solar eclipse, or the positions of other heavenly bodies, when which star or planet will appear. Okay, so this kind of knowledge. Now, if this mathematical certainty was not there in the working of the universe, then at best the adepts could only make a guess. They could only make an approximation. But that was not the case. The sinking of the continents and isles of Atlantis, it happened over a long period. Thousands of years it took, beginning in the Miocene period. And as its largest continent disappeared under the ocean, the largest landmass which comprised Atlantis, when it went under the ocean, the movement of land and water, it caused the rise of the Alps mountains, which are in Europe. So this is a gradual process, and today in our present times, certain of our present continents, they are also observed to be gradually sinking. This observation has been made by the Mahatma also. He's saying this, that certain of our present continents are also observed to be gradually sinking. Now, about the sinking of Atlantis, Some of you, if you have read the writings of Plato, he has mentioned about it. But he refers only to the last island, Poseidonis. And he would have got this knowledge from his ancestor, Solon. Solon was a great Greek legislator, and he had been told by an Egyptian priest about the sinking of Poseidonis. So, and this event, the sinking of this island Poseidonis, it occurred 9,000 years before their time. So, how this Egyptian priest knew about it? Because the Egyptian civilization, it was highly evolved in learning, and they had preserved records of the past millenniums. So they had all that knowledge when all those islands of Atlantis they sank. But that priest, he did not reveal the entire chronology. He just mentioned about the sinking of the last continent. Okay. And now even science has finally accepted that the existence of these continents and islands of Atlantis, it was there. There was this deep sea exploration, the Challenger expedition, and it has fully confirmed through its reports of geology and paleontology. Okay. This Challenger exploration, in fact, it was a 3.5-year long oceanographic exploration cruise. This was a joint venture between British Admiralty and the Royal Society. And they went on this exploration cruise from 1872 to 1876. And that is when they, through their reports and records, whatever they found, they have confirmed the presence of Atlantis. Then Mahatma Ji briefly touches upon a very great event which took place. It is the great war between the inhabitants of Shambhala and Poseidonis. Now, this war took place 2,500 years before Poseidonis sank. Okay. Shambhala, we know it is said to be a mystic region in the Central Asia over the Gobi Desert. And during that period, it was an island which was surrounded by the Central Asian Sea. This island, Shambhala, it is where the highly advanced spiritual beings are said to dwell. And all the avatars also are said to come from that region. So on account of their great spiritual evolution of those beings who inhabit that land, they are also called sons of the fire mist. Okay, so this is Shambhala. And then the inhabitants of Poseidonis. Poseidonis was the last remaining island of Atlantis. So on that island was the remaining population of this vanishing Atlantean race. And those people, the Poseidonis inhabitants, they were masters of great learning. The Atlantean root race had reached great heights of learning. But they were very selfish, if not entirely wicked. So wickedness would have been to some extent in them, but they were very, very selfish. And so these sons of fire mist, that is the spiritual beings of Shambhala, they won the war which happened between the Atlanteans and them. And references of this war, they are also, Madame Blavatsky has given references of this account in her book Isis Unveiled Volume 1. So if you are interested in that, you can refer to that book. Then we come to the fifth question from Senate. He asked Mahatma Ji that I find that the most common question asked about occult philosophy by fairly intelligent people who begin to inquire about it is, does it give any explanation of the origin of evil? Okay, that is a point on which you have formally promised to touch and which it might be worthwhile to take up before long. So basically his question is, what occult philosophy has to say about origin of evil? Now, if you remember, Mahatma Ji had already written about this subject in his notes on Hume's manuscript on God. That was the chronological letter number 88. And in which he had written elaborately on this topic about evil. And he says that he will elaborate on this topic, but not before Senate already studies what was given. So just very briefly to tell you only about this particular topic, what Mahatma Ji mentioned about evil in that letter, the previous letter. he mentioned that evil is the absence of good, and it exists but for him who is made its victim. So, see, this world is of duality. So, evil and good both exist together. Okay. And he says there are two main causes of evil, but nature is not one of them. What we see in nature, like suppose a tiger eats a deer. So we'll think, oh, this is so bad. This is not good. But that is not the case. You see, nature follows the law of necessity and eternal fitness of things. So it cannot be called evil. What Mahatma Ji says that real evil proceeds from human intelligence. Now, this human intelligence, here he refers to the physical intelligence, the lower mind. So this is the first cause. There are two causes of evil. The first is human intelligence. This human intelligence, it makes man a free agent in nature. He has a free will. And by virtue of that free will, he disassociates himself from nature. He's not in harmony with nature. His actions, they are motivated by selfishness and greediness. And evil is the progeny of such actions. So Mahatma Ji says that humanity then alone is the true source of evil. The origin of every evil, whether small or great, is in human action. Okay, this was written in that previous letter, number 88. So this is the first cause. And the second cause in that same letter, Mahatma Ji mentioned that nearly 2/3 of the evils that pursue humanity is religion. Religion under whatever form and in whatever nation. Sorry. Please excuse me, I have a very sore throat. He said that the ignorance of men, the ignorance created gods, and the cunning took advantage of that opportunity, meaning the priestly class, priesthood. So religion is the second major cause of evil. The intelligence of man and religion. These are the two causes of the origin of evil. Okay, so everyone will do well to study that letter 88 again. In it, Mahatma Ji has mentioned quite enough about this origin of evil. But because Atlantis is greatly connected with evil, those people were very selfish and wickedness to a certain extent. So even though Atlantis was not exactly the origin of evil, still Mahatma M thinks that Senate should be given more details about Atlantis. And for this, Mahatma KH advised Senate to see the notes appended to Hume's translation. Hume had translated something about what Eliphas Levi had written in connection to Atlantis. So that would appear in the forthcoming Theosophist, and Mahatma KH is advising Senate to read that note. Okay. Now, in those previous Theosophists, notes from the Mahatmas would often be published by its editor. Editor was Madame Blavatsky. In fact, the old Theosophists, right from 1879 to 1940, they are available on the T.S. Adyar resource website. So if anybody would like to read those notes or articles which were published in the Theosophist by the Mahatmas, you can refer to them online. Then Mahatma Ji tells Senate that he will elaborate his answer, and he says that contemporary science, it is right in many generalities, but whatever conclusion the science comes to, they are based on assumptions or premises which are incorrect. They are faulty. Okay. For instance, he says that science has not got the geological time periods correct. Recently, we mentioned those ages, the Miocene age, and these are all geological time periods. But Mahatma Ji is telling that these time periods are not correct. Although science is right in concluding that while Atlantis was gradually sinking, simultaneously the new American continent that was being formed. Okay, so these events, they were happening, but what period, which duration, in that we have no clarity. Now, in line with the cyclic law of evolution, evolution of these races: development, growth, maturity, and decline. This is the cyclic law of every race and every sub-race. So according to this law, next in turn are the British Isles, to be destroyed by underwater volcanoes and sea. This Mahatma Ji is telling Senate. Okay. Next in line, next in turn are the British Isles. They will follow the same cycle. And mainland Europe, like France and other European countries, they too will follow the same fate. So the European continent will be destroyed next. Now, water and land, they keep appearing and disappearing periodically. They shift each other in turn. So immediately after the present islands and continents, they disappear. For example, he mentioned that next the British Isles and the European continent will disappear. So immediately after that happens, then the land masses, which were once upon a time Lemuria and Atlantis, they will rise up. They will come up again and they will bear the humanity of the next root race. That is the sixth root race. And at that time, there will be very few seas or great oceans. Much of the globe will be occupied by landmass. Okay, so the sixth root race will come up on that land. And when the last subrace of the sixth root race will be living on the land and it will start declining, will be nearing its end, then the islands or the continents which have presently sunk, the present sunken continents, they will start to reappear. So you see how it is happening sequentially. One goes down, the other comes up. The new root race flourishes on the continent which has risen up. And when it is nearing its end, the one which had previously gone down, that will again rise up to bear the next root race. So every new obscuration, that means whenever one root race is going into obscuration, it is declining. It is marked by either fire or water, a cataclysm of fire or water. Okay. And in addition to this, in the middle of the root race, there is an upheaval by flood or fire again. So not only at the end of the root race, but also in the middle of every root race, there is this cataclysm. Okay, that upheaval, it demarcates the ascending and descending phases of the root race. For example, when the Atlanteans reached the apex of their development and glory, then they were destroyed by water. So that cataclysm took place. And to this day, their degenerated remnants are present. So this law of cycles, it is the same and it is unchanging for every race and subrace. Whatever is the state of the fourth root race today, it will be the state of our, that is the fifth root race someday. And Mahatma Ji tells in it, when your race, that is the fifth, when it will have reached its zenith of physical intellectuality meaning the lower mind, okay, and develop the highest civilization, then unable to go any higher in its own cycle, it will progress, its progress towards absolute evil will be arrested by one of such cataclysmic changes. So when you reach the peak of your physical intellectuality, when you reach the peak of the development of your highest civilization, then one such cataclysmic change will arrest any further progress. Okay, the great civilization will be destroyed and all the sub-races of that race will be going down their respective cycles after a short period of glory and learning. So every race, sub-race has a short period of glory and learning, and then ultimately it has to go down. Mahatma Ji asks in it, see, he tells him, remember the difference we make between material and spiritual civilizations. That is what we mentioned just now. Physical intellectuality, it is the lower mind, concrete thinking. Okay, it gives rise to highest materialistic civilization because it is marked by desire, personal desire, self-centered desire. So physical intellectuality, no matter how high you rise in that, it will give rise to materialistic civilization. It is dominated by selfishness. Okay, and that will inevitably lead to evil. This is what happened with the Atlanteans. In contrast, spiritual civilizations, they are developed when humans will reach the zenith of the higher mind, that is buddhi manas. Okay, and such civilizations, they are marked by selflessness, by the good for all. So this is the difference between material and spiritual civilization, which Mahatma Ji is asking Senate to take note of. The same thing happened to our predecessors. We know that the Atlanteans and the Lemurians, they were arrested in their progress towards this increasing evil by such cataclysm due to the selfishness. Now, a point to be noted over here is that the modern day Greek and Roman people, they belong to the fifth root race. Okay, because earlier Mahatma Ji had mentioned that the old Roman Empire and the Greek Empire, they were remnants of the fourth root race. But whatever people now you find living in these two countries, in Italy, Rome, and in Greece, they belong to the fifth root race. And then Mahatma Ji makes a big revelation. That big revelation is that, see, he has already explained to Senate how one root race follows the next, one sub race follows the next. Okay. But the knowledge and the power which these races acquire, that knowledge and power, it is eternal. Every race attains this knowledge to whatever extent they deserve. But when the race perishes, this knowledge does not perish with it. It is carried forward to the next race. And this is what he means, Mahatma Ji means when he says that no mother race, any more than her sub-races and offshoots, is allowed by the one reigning law. One reigning law is the law of cycles of this evolution of the races. So it is not allowed by this one reigning law to trespass upon the prerogatives. That means the rights or the privileges of the next race and sub-race, which will follow. Least of all to encroach upon the knowledge and the powers in store for its successor. So this is equivalent to the saying, thou shalt not eat of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil of the tree that is growing for thy heirs. Okay, this tree is in the safekeeping. It is entrusted to the adepts by the Dhyan Chauhans. The Dhyan Chauhans, who are the protectors of our race and the trustees for those who are coming. Now, this is an allegory. It should be well understood. Mahatma Ji is telling Senate. And in his chronological letter number 18, Mahatma Ji has already written to Senate about the planetaries, that is the Dhyan Chauhans, in whose safekeeping this knowledge is there. So in that letter, it is mentioned that the Dhyan Chauhans, it refers to planetaries in whose minds the universal truths are an ever-present reality. These planetaries or Dhyan Chauhans, they are the protectors and the trustees of the races, because from them, from the planetaries, this knowledge is passed to all the races of that cycle. And what is this knowledge which is passed? It is the knowledge about the universal truths. Okay, because these universal truths are ever-present reality in the minds of the planetaries. So from them, it is passed to all the races of that cycle to help in their spiritual evolution. So this tree of knowledge is what Mahatma Ji is referring. It is in the safekeeping of the brotherhood of adepts. Okay. Now, briefly, I'll tell you what was mentioned about the planetaries in that letter. It is chronological letter number 18. Okay. In that, it was mentioned that planetary spirits, they are the rulers or the governors of the planet. Okay. They are very highly evolved. They have already passed through human evolution, perhaps in some other world. And now they can no longer err. They cannot make a mistake. And they govern or rule the planet. So they appear on Earth at the origin of every new humankind. Okay, which means at the junction of two ends of the great cycle, at the close of one round and the start of the next. So at that junction, they appear on Earth. Okay, and when humanity reappears in the next round, then at that time, the conditions on the Earth are very different from when a new race has to appear. Why the conditions are different? See, you need to understand how this evolution of cycles is happening. There is always an overlap of one race with the new race which is coming, right? But that is not the case when one round is closing and a new round is going to start, because the planet goes into obscuration. So all the beings who were evolving on the planet, they go into obscuration, right? So what happens now when the next round starts? Then there was no overlap. So where is that knowledge? Where has all the knowledge gone? It is there with the planetaries. And therefore, the planetary has to mix with these primitive men. It means he has to incarnate among men. Okay. And he incarnates among the first race only, first root race. And he refreshes their memories and reveals to them the truths which they already knew during the preceding round. So he does this by impressing their plastic mind with the eternal truths. So this is basically the vibrations, the mental vibrations. They are impressed on the minds of men so that these universal truths, they are never entirely forgotten in the ages hereafter. Okay. It is said in that letter, Mahatma Ji mentioned that the mission of the planetary spirit is to strike the key note of truth. And once he has directed that truth, the vibration of that truth, okay, to run its course uninterruptedly for the entire cycle, then that planetary, it will disappear from the surface of the planet till the next round. Okay, so he appears in the beginning of the round in the first root race. He incarnates, sets in motion the keynote of truth, and then disappears. So this is what are called the innate ideas. The vibrations of the primitive truth is what the philosophers of our age, they call as the innate ideas. But all that happens only for the benefit of the first race. And then Mahatma Ji tells in it, now once that keynote of truth has been struck, it happened only in the first root race. So it is the duty of that race to choose the fit recipients among its sons. They are set apart as the vessels who become the custodians of this entire stock of knowledge. Okay, the deserving people, the more highly evolved people, and they become the custodians of this knowledge, and they give this out to the future races and generations till the close of that round. So this happens because the next race which will come, it will overlap with the previous race. Okay, so every race has its adept, and these adepts are allowed to give the people as much of their knowledge as the men of that race deserve. So become deserving. To be deserving is the most important thing. You will get what you deserve. Nobody gets more than what he deserves. Not before his time, not more than what he deserves. And Mahatma Ji also mentions that every race has its Buddha. The adepts of the seventh race, okay, just like we have the adepts now, we are in the fifth root race. So we have our adepts. Now, the adepts of the seventh root race, they will be far higher than any of the previous races. Why? Because among them, there will be the future planetary. After the seventh root race, the round will close, right? So when the next round will begin, then in that, there has to be a planetary who will again be born in the first root race of the next round and carry on or give these truths to the people of the first root race. Therefore, the adepts of seventh race are far higher than any of these adepts of the previous races. They will have the future planetary, and he will be the Dhyan Chauhan, whose duty it will be to instruct and refresh the memory of the first race of the fifth round men after this planet's future obscuration. Okay, so we need to try and understand how the succession of races and rounds happens, and how the knowledge, which is eternal, it is not lost at the time these races perish, but it is carried forward and it is given again to the first race in the next round. Then Mahatma Ji assured Senate that the doctrine of races and rounds, it is a cardinal part of the esoteric doctrine, which is studied by the Buddhist lamas. This is not an invention of the Mahatmas, as Hume had accused. He had accused the Mahatmas that they are inventing races and rounds as they please. And in fact, Rice David, he had written some explanation on Buddhism, a book on Buddhism. And Mahatma KH, he got special permission from his own master to give an explanation to clarify what Rice David had written, so that there would be no doubts in the mind of Senate. So he took special permission of his own master, the Chauhan, and sent that explanation to Senate. So this completes the answer 5. And I think we'll start this question 6 because it's, but I don't think we'll be able to complete this question 6. Question 6, Senate asks that closely allied to this question would be another often put. What is the good of the whole cyclic process if spirit only emerges at the end of all things, pure and impersonal, as it was at first before its descent into matter? Okay. Now, if we say that this whole cyclic process and in the cyclic evolution, in the end, spirit is going to emerge pure and impersonal, then what is the point in having this cyclic evolution? This is Senate's question. Okay. Now, in Theosophy, what Theosophy tells us is that in the universal cycle, first there is involution of spirit into matter. And then there is evolution where the matter is resolved back into spirit. Okay, so this is the cycle of evolution. And Mahatma Ji explains that what emerges at the end of the universal cycle, it is not pure and impersonal spirit, but it is the collective remembrances which are absorbed from every new fifth principle. Fifth principle is the Mansik principle. Okay, that is the pure mind, the higher mind, which can be assimilated with buddhi. That is the fifth principle. So all the personal remembrances from this fifth principle, it is this collective remembrance. So that is what emerges at the end of the evolutionary cycle. Okay, in the beginning of the cycle, it was pure spirit which had no experience, but as it is evolving into matter, it is gaining experience in its evolutionary cycle. And these remembrances, these experiences, the collective remembrances, that is what is emerging as the spirit at the end of the evolutionary cycle. And this happens in the long series of being. Okay, so this cyclic evolution where this ego, it is the individuality or the Atma Buddhi Manas, it garners these experiences and brings its fruit of benefit. All these experiences, they bring their fruit of benefit to the ego. Okay, for example, just like the individuality, it enjoys the devachanic state in between two incarnations. Individuality or the ego incarnates in the personality. After physical death, there is devachanic state, and then again the ego incarnates, right? So devachanic state is the fruit of its experiences. So similarly, even in the higher evolutions, that means after the perfected human being, okay, perfected human being is the adept, his evolution continues. So even in those higher evolutions, between two objective existences of the ego, he has the chance to exist as a Dhyan Chauhan. Now this is a very important statement which needs contemplation, meditation by everyone, what it means, because it is talking about the higher evolutions. Okay, ego itself is Atma Buddhi Manas, Now there is no physical incarnation, but still there is an objective existence of the ego. And in between two such existences, the ego has the chance to exist as a Dhyan Chauhan. This is in analogy with the states of incarnation into personality and the devachanic state, which is enjoyed by the individuality. If this point is not clear, we can later take it in our question and answer session. Okay. Now, Mahatma Ji tells in it that a pure and impersonal spirit is only an abstraction. Abstraction means it is just an idea or a concept which cannot be objectively perceived, even by the most spiritual person. It is not a thing which can be perceived in any way. It is just an idea. Why? Because spirit becomes manifest only in union with matter. It is the life in matter. Separated from matter, it is absolute negation of life. Okay, negation of life and being. Whereas we know that matter is inseparable from spirit. There is no dead element. This is what Mahatma Ji has mentioned so many times, that there is just one element, which is spirit and matter. Sorry, spirit hyphen matter. There is no and in between. They are not separate. Okay, spirit spirit pervades matter, and matter is inseparable from spirit. So life and consciousness, they exist even beyond what can be felt on earth. The existence that we are leading on earth, beyond this also, there is life and consciousness. And we must try and understand the states of consciousness of our individuality after it has separated from this earthly body, that is the physical body. What happens after the physical body perishes? What are the states of consciousnesses? To understand what is the purpose of this whole process of life on earth, Mahatma Ji is telling Synod that this life has to be studied in its entire series of manifestations. Meaning not just life on earth, but prior to that and even after life on earth, how this process continues, that entire series of manifestations has to be studied. On this earth, life is just one state of being. Okay, but in this entire cycle of necessity, which we say is the journey of the pilgrim is the monad. So the journey of the monad, that is this cycle of necessity, there will unfold higher and higher states of being. Okay, much higher. That means after, from humanity, when we achieve perfect, when a man becomes a perfect human, then he becomes an adept, and then even higher states of being will unfold. So that entire series of being, of life, has to be studied to understand what life is. Then Mahatma Ji says that men of modern science, they will never be able to grasp what life is so long as they study it separately and apart from the universal life. Okay? To solve the problem that what is the good of the whole cyclic process, one has to become an occultist. One has to analyze and experience with life personally in all its phases. This is what Mahatma Ji tells Synod. And this is exactly what the adepts did. Experiments in all departments of nature and experience the truth for themselves, to know life as it manifests on earth and also beyond the limits of physical death. Now, to know life not only in mineral, vegetable, and animal form, that is concrete matter. Okay, so that can be known, that can be studied, but also to know life in its most spiritual form, which is imponderable matter. Okay, matter which at least presently in physical form, you cannot perceive it. Okay, but it is still there, that imponderable matter, and life in that matter. So evolution in those states of being, that also needs to be studied. And then Mahatma Ji adds that unless their doctrine of this all-pervading, infinite, omnipresent life, unless that is accepted, I request everybody, please mute your mics. Okay, so unless that doctrine is accepted, the terms which he has used, please pay attention to that. They are very important. He says the all-pervading, infinite, omnipresent life. Unless that doctrine is accepted, this mystery of life, we will not be able to solve it. This one life, it is also termed as the one law or the one element. And life apart from an organism, we know an organism is alive, but if we consider life apart from an organism, then it is only a mode of motion. So life also means motion. Okay? And since life is all pervading, it implies motion is all pervading. And as we know, there is no matter apart from life. There is no dead matter, right? No matter apart from life implies that matter is always in motion. So absolute rest is inconceivable. Okay. And whatever we see, this light, heat, magnetism, chemical affinity, electricity, they are just different phases of this one and same universal omnipotent force, which is called one life. And science has also come to the same conclusions, but partial conclusion of this chemical affinity. Okay. Chemical affinity of life. Okay. They know that, okay, in the basic cell of an organism, the living component which is there, that is protoplasm. Protoplasm is nothing, it is a mixture of so many chemicals, okay, atoms and molecules brought together. But it is something more than that. You can bring all those chemicals together, but then it becomes alive. Okay, so that is there in organisms, which are concrete manifestations. But life in its abstract sense, that is not yet comprehended. Okay, so I think here we will come to a stop now. And I will request Meenakshi ji to give us the translation in Hindi. And we can continue this in our next session.
नमस्ते, थैंक यू सो मच सिस्टर. मैं इसका ट्रांसलेशन करने की कोशिश कर रही हूँ. मास्टर लेटर नंबर 93A और B में कहते हैं आगे कि एसीरियन और फोनिकियन सभ्यताओं की निशानी और स्मृति नहीं रही. पुरातत्व भूविज्ञान दर्शाता है कि मनुष्य की स्मृति इतिहास की स्वीकृति से भी कहीं अधिक पहले चली जाती है और कभी शक्तिशाली राष्ट्र रहने वाले उनके उत्तराधिकारियों द्वारा संरक्षित पवित्र आलेख अभी भी अधिक विश्वसनीय है. हम ग्लेशियल पीरियड के पूर्व की सभ्यताओं के बारे में बात करते हैं. आगे वे कहते हैं कि चाइना के मूल निवासी चौथी रेस की सबसे उच्च और आखिरी शाखा में अपनी उच्चतम सभ्यता तक पहुंच गए जब एशिया में पांचवी रेस ने शायद ही पदार्पण किया था. विगा के नॉर्दर्न जॉल द्वारा खोजे गए साइबेरियन तट से दूर द्वीपों का समूह हाथियों, मैमथ, गेंडे और अन्य पशुओं की विशाल हड्डियों के बीच घोड़ों आदि के फॉसिल से बिखरा हुआ पाया गया, जो उस काल से संबंधित थे जब आपका विज्ञान कहता है मनुष्य तब पृथ्वी पर प्रकट नहीं हुआ था. प्रलय के पूर्व वाले विशाल प्राणियों के साथ घोड़े और भेड़ें कैसे पाई गई, ऐसा मास्टर प्रश्न करते हैं. आगे वे कहते हैं कि साइबेरिया द्वीपों का समूह अब प्रचंड शीत की बेड़ियों में जकड़ा हुआ है, जहां मनुष्य का वास नहीं, जो कि जानवरों से भी नाजुक है, जहां न केवल उष्णकटिबंधीय मौसम था बल्कि उस चौथी रेस की सबसे प्राचीन सभ्यताओं में से एक का स्थान था, जिसकी उच्चतम निशानी अब हमें ह्रास हुए चाइनामैन में मिलती है और जिनकी सबसे निकृष्ट निशानी तीसरी रेस के शेष बचे हुए के साथ मिश्रित है. मैंने आपसे पहले ही कहा है कि अब पृथ्वी पर आध्यात्मिक रूप से विकसित लोग पांचवी रूट रेस की पहली सब रेस के हैं और वे एशियाई आर्यन लोग हैं. बौद्धिक रूप से विकसित अंतिम आखिरी सब रेस से आप यूरोपीय श्वेत लोग हैं. बहुसंख्य मानव जाति फोर्थ रूट रेस की सातवीं सब रेस की है चाइनामैन और उनकी शाखाएं, उपशाखाएं और फोर्थ रेस के अन्य सब रेसेस के शेष बाकी और थर्ड रेस के सेवेंथ सब रेस से है। यह सभी मानवता के पतित उदाहरण अत्यधिक प्रगत राष्ट्रों के प्रत्यक्ष वंशज है, जिनका न तो नाम और न ही कोई स्मृति बची है, सिवाय पोपेल बुल और अन्य कुछ पुस्तकों के जिन्हें विज्ञान नहीं जानता है। अगला प्रश्न है सीनेट का, एटलांटिस महाद्वीप का अस्तित्व किस युग से संबंधित था और क्या प्रलयंकारी परिवर्तन जो इसके विलुप्त होने का कारण बना पूरे मनवंतरिक विकास में प्रलय काल के अनुरूप राउंड के विकास में किस नियत स्थान पर आया था? इस पर मास्टर उत्तर देते हैं कि एटलांटिस मायोसिन काल से संबंधित था। राउंड्स के विकास में हर चीज अपने नियत समय और स्थान पर आती है, अन्यथा उत्तम अतीन्द्रिय दृष्टा के लिए एकदम सही घंटे और वर्ष की गणना करना असंभव होगा जब ऐसी बड़ी और छोटी प्रलयंकारी घटनाएं घटित होगी। एटलांटिस महाद्वीप और द्वीपों का समूह का डूबना मायोसिन काल के दौरान शुरू हुआ, जैसा कि आपके कुछ महाद्वीपों को अब धीरे धीरे डूबते हुए देखा जाता है। सबसे पहले सबसे बड़े महाद्वीप के पूर्णतः डूबने के साथ आल्प्स का उभरना शुरू हुआ और दूसरा प्लेटो द्वारा उल्लिखित फेयर आइलैंड्स के साथ एटलांटिस विलुप्त हुआ। साइस के इजिप्शियन प्रीस्ट ने उनके पूर्वज सोलोन को बताया कि एटलांटिस उनके समय के 9000 वर्ष पहले नष्ट हो गया था। यह कोई काल्पनिक तारीख नहीं थी, क्योंकि उन्होंने सहस्त्राब्दियों तक अपने रिकॉर्ड्स को अत्यंत सावधानी से संरक्षित रखा था। लेकिन उन्होंने केवल पोसाइडोनिस के बारे में बात की और यहाँ तक कि महान ग्रीक शासकों को भी उन्होंने अपने गुप्त कालक्रम के बारे में नहीं बताया था। शंबाला निवासी जब वह मध्य एशियाई सागर द्वीप था, उनके हमारे सन्स ऑफ द फायर मिस्ट की पोसाइडोनिस के स्वार्थी लेकिन पूरी तरह से दुष्ट नहीं ऐसे तांत्रिकों मैजिशियन पर विजय, यह महान घटना केवल 11,446 साल पहले हुई थी। इस संदर्भ में आइसिस के वॉल्यूम 1 में अधूरी और आंशिक रूप से छिपी हुई ट्रेडिशन पर पढ़े, ऐसा मास्टर सीनेट को कहते हैं। सीनेट का अगला प्रश्न है, मुझे लगता है कि बुद्धिमान लोग क्या ऑकल्ट फिलोसॉफी के संदर्भ में यह आम सवाल पूछते हैं कि क्या यह बुराई की उत्पत्ति का कोई स्पष्टीकरण देता है? इस पर मास्टर उत्तर देते हैं कि निश्चित ही मैंने इस विषय पर बहुत पहले मिस्टर ह्यूम के ऑन गॉड पर अपने नोट्स में बात की है। Very sorry. मास्टर एम कहते हैं कि बेहतर होगा कि मैं आपको एटलांटिस के बारे में कुछ विवरण दूं, क्योंकि यह बुराई की जड़ से नहीं पर बुराई से बहुत जुड़ा हुआ है। बेशक आपका विज्ञान व्यापक रूप से सही है, लेकिन उसके आधार गलत है या त्रुटिपूर्ण है। उदाहरण के तौर पर वह यह कहने में सही है कि जब नया अमेरिका बन रहा था तब प्राचीन एटलांटिस डूब रहा था और धीरे धीरे नष्ट हो रहा था, लेकिन वह न तो अपने दिए गए युगों में सही है और न ही उस डूबने की अवधि की गणना में। भविष्य में ब्रिटिश द्वीपों का भी डूब जाना उनकी किस्मत में है। विपत्तिग्रस्तों की सूची में वे पहले हैं जिन्हें आग और पानी से नष्ट किया जाना है। उसके बाद फ्रांस और अन्य देशों की बारी है। जब वे फिर उभर कर आएंगे, तब वर्तमान मानवजाति की 6th रूट रेस की अंतिम 7th सब रेस लेमुरिया और एटलांटिस पर फल फूल रही होगी। दोनों भी फिर से प्रकट होगी। वर्तमान के द्वीपों और महाद्वीपों का लोप होने के तुरंत बाद इनका पुनः प्रकट होना और हमारे ग्लोब पर बहुत थोड़े समुद्र और बड़े जलाशय पाए जाएंगे। पानी के साथ साथ भूमि भी प्रकट होकर लुप्त होगी और समय समय पर स्थानांतरण करेगी। हर नए परिवर्तन के आगमन का संकेत हमेशा प्रलय से मिलता है। यह या तो आग से या पानी से होता है, लेकिन इसके अलावा प्रत्येक रिंग या रूट रेस दो विभागों में किसी एक या दूसरे द्वारा कटनी चाहिए। इस प्रकार अपने विकास और वैभव के चरम पर पहुंचकर फोर्थ रेस यानी एटलांटियन पानी से नष्ट हो गई। अभी आप केवल उनके ह्रास हुए शेष अंश पाते हैं, जिनकी प्रत्येक सब रेस के वैभव और समृद्धि से संपन्न दिन थे। जैसे अब है वैसे ही किसी दिन आप होगे। सभी साइकिल्स का नियम एक है और अपरिवर्तनीय है। जब आपकी फिफ्थ रेस भौतिक बुद्धिमत्ता के अपने चरम पर पहुंच जाएंगी और उच्चतम सभ्यता में विकसित होगी, मास्टर कहते हैं कि भौतिक और आध्यात्मिक सभ्यताओं के बीच हम जो अंतर करते हैं उसे याद रखें। अपनी साइकिल में और अधिक ऊपर जाने में असमर्थ होगी। बुराई की चरम सीमा की ओर इसके बढ़ने को ऐसे प्रलयकारी परिवर्तनों में से एक द्वारा अवरुद्ध किया जाएगा। इसके पहले वाले लेमुरियंस और एटलांटियंस की तरह थर्ड और फोर्थ रेसेस के मनुष्यों को भी उनके आगे बढ़ने से रोका गया था। पुराने ग्रीक और रोमन एटलांटियंस के अवशेषों को देखें। आधुनिक सभी फिफ्थ रेस से है। देखिए उनकी प्रसिद्धि और महिमा के दिन कितने महान और कितने छोटे, कितने क्षणभंगुर थे, क्योंकि वे रूट रेस की 7 शाखाओं की सब रेसेस मात्र थी। साइकिल्स के नियम के तहत न तो कोई मूल रेस और न ही उसकी सब रेसेस और शाखाओं को अगली रेस या सब रेस के विशेषाधिकारों पर अतिक्रमण करने की अनुमति नहीं है। कम से कम उसके उत्तराधिकारी रेसेस के लिए रखे हुए ज्ञान और शक्तियों पर अतिक्रमण करने नहीं। हम दृढ़तापूर्वक कहते हैं कि आप अपने उत्तराधिकारियों के लिए बढ़ रहे वृक्ष की अच्छाई और बुराई का ज्ञान का फल नहीं खाओगे। फ्रूट ऑफ नॉलेज ऑफ गुड एंड इविल। यह वृक्ष हमारी सुरक्षा में है, जिसे ध्यान चौहानों, जो हमारी रेस के संरक्षक और ट्रस्टी है, उनके द्वारा आने वाली रेस के लिए हमें सौंपा गया है। इस रूपक को समझने का प्रयास करें और प्लेनेटरीज पर मेरे पत्र में दिए गए हिंट्स को कभी न भूले, ऐसा मास्टर सिनेट से कहते हैं। आगे मास्टर कहते हैं कि प्रत्येक राउंड के प्रारंभ में जब मानवता प्रत्येक रेस और उसकी सब रेस के आगमन के लिए प्रदान की गई स्थितियों की तुलना में काफी भिन्न परिस्थितियों में पुनः प्रकट होती है, तब एक प्लेनेटरी को इन प्रारंभिक मनुष्यों के साथ मिश्रित होना होता है, उनकी स्मृति को पुनर्जीवित करने और उन सच्चाइयों को उजागर करने के लिए जो वे पिछले राउंड के दौरान जानते थे। लेकिन ऐसे केवल पहली रेस के लाभ के लिए होता है। यह प्रथम रेस का कर्तव्य है कि वह अपने वंशजों के बीच उपयुक्त पात्रों को चुने, जो ज्ञान के भंडार को अपने में समाहित करके राउंड के अंत तक आने वाली रेसेस और पीढ़ियों में वितरित करने के लिए पात्र हो। प्रत्येक नई रेस में हमें उन्हें अपना ज्ञान उतना ही देने की अनुमति है जितना कि उस रेस के मनुष्य उसके हकदार हो। अंतिम 7th रेस में उनके बुद्ध हो गए, जैसे कि उनके प्रत्येक पूर्ववर्ती रेसेस में थे, लेकिन उसके सिद्ध पुरुष वर्तमान रेस में से किसी भी सिद्ध पुरुष से कहीं अधिक उन्नत हो गए, क्योंकि उनमें भावी प्लेनेटरी यानी ध्यान चौहान रहेंगे, जिनका कर्तव्य 5th राउंड के मनुष्यों की पहली रेस को निर्देश देना या स्मृति को पुनर्जीवित करना होगा, इस ग्रह के भावी प्रच्छन्नता के बाद। खैर, आपको यह दिखाने के लिए कि न केवल रेसेस का आविष्कार हमारे द्वारा नहीं किया गया था, बल्कि वे लामा बौद्धों और हमारे गुह्य सिद्धांत का अध्ययन करने वाले सभी लोगों का प्रधान सिद्धांतवाद है। मैं आपको 1 या 2 पृष्ठों पर बुद्धिज्म पर लिखित रिस डेविड्स का उदाहरण देता हूँ। आपके लाभ के लिए यह मेरे सद्गुरु चौहान की विशेष अनुमति से लिखा गया है। किसी भी प्राच्य विद्यावादी ने इसमें निहित सत्यों को जाना नहीं। आप पहले पाश्चात्य व्यक्ति हैं जिन्हें अब यह समझाया गया है। अगला प्रश्न, पूरे चक्रीय प्रक्रिया का यानी साइक्लिक प्रोसेस का क्या लाभ अगर आत्मा सबसे अंत में शुद्ध और निर्वैयक्तिक रूप से उभरती है, जैसा कि वह पदार्थ में उतरने से पहले थी। इस पर मास्टर उत्तर देते हैं, सबसे अंत में जो उभरता है वह न केवल शुद्ध और निर्वैयक्तिक जीवात्मा है, बल्कि संग्रहित व्यक्तिगत स्मृतियां अस्तित्व की लंबी श्रृंखला में हर नए पांचवें तत्व से छूट जाती है। और यदि सभी चीजों के अंत में मान लीजिए कि अब से कुछ लाखों लाख वर्षों में आत्मा को परमात्मा की तरह अपने शुद्ध निर्वैयक्तिक अस्तित्वहीनता में विराम करना होगा, तब भी साइक्लिक प्रोसेस में कुछ अच्छा होना चाहिए, क्योंकि प्रत्येक जीवात्मा को ग्रहों पर अस्तित्वों के बीच लंबे अंतराल में ध्यान चौहानों के रूप में विद्यमान होने का मौका होता है। निम्नतम देवाचनी से लेकर उच्चतम प्लैनेटरी तक अपने सामूहिक जीवनों के फल का आनंद लेते हैं। लेकिन शुद्ध और निर्वैयक्तिक आत्मा क्या है? क्यों ऐसी आत्मा अस्तित्वहीन केवल एक कल्पना है, हमारी समझ से पूर्णतः परे है? यहाँ तक कि बहुत ही आध्यात्मिक व्यक्ति के लिए भी यह केवल पदार्थ के साथ मिलकर कुछ बनता है, इसीलिए यह हमेशा कुछ होता है, क्योंकि पदार्थ अनंत अविनाशी है और आत्मा के बिना अस्तित्वहीन है। जो पदार्थ में जीवन है, पदार्थ से अलग होकर यह जीवन और अस्तित्व का पूर्ण अभाव बन जाता है, जबकि पदार्थ इससे अविभाज्य है। क्या विज्ञान के अनुसार मृत्यु के बाद वही अचेतनता की अवस्था नहीं आती जो जन्म से पहले थी? क्या जब जीवन हमारे शरीर से जाता है तब वह उतना ही निर्वैयक्तिक नहीं हो जाता जितना वह गर्भ को अनुप्राणित करने से पहले था? पृथ्वी पर के जीवन, स्थूल देह की मृत्यु के परे जीवन, खनिज, वनस्पति, पशु और आध्यात्मिक जीवन, इनके सभी अवस्थाओं का व्यक्तिगत रूप से विश्लेषण और अनुभव करना, ठोस पदार्थ के साथ संयोजन में जीवन और साथ ही अचिंतनीय परमाणु में मौजूद जीवन, इस बृहद प्रश्नों को सुलझाने के लिए गुह्य विद्या ने ऑकल्टिस्ट बनना पड़ता है। चूंकि गति सर्वव्यापी है और पूर्ण विश्राम अकल्पनीय है, गति किसी भी रूप के तहत प्रकट हो सकती है, चाहे प्रकाश, गर्मी, मैग्नेटिज्म, रासायनिक मेल या बिजली के रूप में। यह सभी एकमात्र सार्वभौमिक सर्वशक्तिमान शक्ति की अवस्थाएं हैं। वह प्रोटियस जिसे वैज्ञानिक महान अज्ञात के रूप में नमन करते हैं और हम परमात्मा परम नियम कहते हैं। थैंक यू। नमस्ते।
Thank you, Meenakshi ji and Vibha ji. So we open up the forum for any discussion. Anybody wants to say anything? I just want to add this thought that I think it has been mentioned, but just that what happens, what towards the end, what he talks about, the fifth principle being enlightened by all that has happened, and which is what the spirit and matter together incorporate in themselves, is very much similar to what happens to our life and death. It is our fifth principle that we take forward in every birth. I mean, that is the core of that is what is retained in the higher mind. So obviously what's happening in the microcosm is happening in the highest level towards the last most time. So that is something. And also one more thing which will kind of clarify this is that the Aryan race, the Aryan race started in 10,000 BC. So that is an important time that one has to remember, because that is from there on, then everything has happened. So the Manu, and what's interesting is so many names. That is why, like in theosophy, we get confused, because here the word which is being used is the planetary spirit, whereas another literature it's called Manu, and it is the Vaivasvata Manu, which is supposed to be the person who started our Aryan root race. So I think both are the same, the Vaivasvata Manu and what is mentioned here as the planetary spirit, which commingled with the race to produce that component for the fifth root race. I think both are the same as far as I understand. Just wanted to say that.
Right. That's right. Planetaries are the watchers, the guides, the protectors, the custodians of the truth. Yes, and it is the Manu which incarnates in the race and carries it forward. So I think this is all very technical knowledge which has been given, which I think individual needs to read by themselves and understand. But if there are any questions, we can take it. You were saying something, Vimalji?
Yeah, what's interesting is that the reason why casteism has happened in India is because what is said in our literature is that Manu, what he found is in the Central Asia part where this new Aryan race was being formed, there were a lot of people coming in from outside, like a lot of immigrants were coming in, and they belonged to the earlier races. So he found that because the core race was getting diluted in its qualities, he made this caste system that okay, these people will not marry between this, there will be no marriage between this group and this group. So he created that caste system for that purpose. But now it has come to what is present now, and what has been something which the society has fought against has become ridiculous. Nobody understands why that happened, and it's a tradition which has no rational anymore. So that's very interesting how the caste system started and why Manu is a reason for that. But he had very good reasons for it. But what has happened because of that is really bad.
So if you read the Manu Sahita, in that all this caste system is mentioned, and the interpretation, of course, as you say, it has been diluted and blown out of proportion. That is true. One of the reasons which you mentioned is correct, but there is a much deeper reason to it. It depends on the evolution of the soul. The evolution of the soul is the marker. This point needs to be really understood. When he speaks of who is a Brahman, Brahman is a person who knows Brahma. So it is the evolution of the soul. Okay, and that is why they say that with your karma, your caste can change. It is not written in stone that if you're a Shudra, you will forever be born a Shudra. If you're a Kshatriya, you forever. No, your soul evolves, it grows. You can become that. So this whole caste system, it is not rightly understood by the people now. And yes, India is always held to, to this, that you are the one who have brought this caste system in the world and atrocities and all of that. Yes, that is a thing, but it needs to be studied in its right perspective, which I think is a very deep reason. You see, Manu is a planetary. How can planetaries can never err? They cannot make a mistake. So this caste system is not a mistake, but its background is something else.
Yeah. And I don't think also that the present Indian thing is that fifth root race. We have also commingled with so many other previous races, and only, today's seers can know exactly who are the true fifth race people in the world today. It's not necessarily India. That's what I think. Because I think that in many ways we are still very backward in our spiritual thinking, actually. I find more advanced and more rational approaches in many other countries. So that's something I feel. So Aryan is, even though we have the same skin color and all that, but it doesn't mean that we are that fifth root race in all of us. There's a lot of mixture in us.
True.
Yeah.
Right. So thank you all very much. We have overshot the time a lot. Actually, this letter is very, very long. In this, till now, we are going to cover many things on physical science. And I hopefully wanted to reach at that point, but there is still one more question. So we'll do it in our next session. Jayashri ji, you have any question? I think you were wanting to ask something.
I wanted to know something about the soul, Atma, you were talking about.
Yes, please tell.
What you were talking about the soul, the Atma, that portion.
The soul, the Atma. The human soul is the fifth principle, the Mansic principle. You are conversant with the septenary constitution of man.
Yes.
Okay, so our fifth principle, which is there, the Mansik principle, that is called the human soul. Okay, and this higher manas, it is the same in between incarnations or through incarnations. It is the same. So whatever experiences are gathered, they are all preserved or stored in our causal body, which is the higher manas or the soul, and then in the next incarnation they are carried forward. So that is why we say that the body dies, the soul does not die. Soul is the Mansik principle, the causal body, which will carry all these forward into the next incarnation. Okay.
But
Now
next
that is-
incarnation, we can change also, no? Supposing we are good in this incarnation, then we may become bad in the next incarnation. Is it so?
Of course, it depends on the choices you make,
Okay, okay.
isn't it? Man has a
Yeah,
free will. He can choose what he wants to do. So you can
yes.
evolve further, you can go back. So regression, progression, everything happens, keeps happening. But in the long run, everyone is going to move forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Most welcome. Anything else? And I really want to give a special thanks to Meenakshi ji. This letter is quite difficult and she is translating it in Hindi so beautifully. Meenakshi ji, thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah, actually, I like that she chooses the only things which she wants to translate. She doesn't translate so many things which are in between in that.
We'll
Which
never get
actually
through it otherwise.
Yeah, otherwise it adds a lot of confusion to the whole thing. Because if you look into every little thing he's saying, then the mind will get totally blown. So the focused part we can understand is better.
Right.
The knowledge which we have to carry back with us for our lives, we can learn from that.
Right.
Good.
So now can we close the session?
Yeah. So, please join me in the closing prayer. Asatoma Satgamaya.
Asatoma Satgamaya.
Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya.
Jyotirgamaya.
Yoga Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti.
Shanti.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining.